This webinar series was born out of the fact that COVID had put paid to our in-person showcase this year. ANFF likes to get together and promote all of the wonderful work that we support and enable throughout our network on an annual basis. And unfortunately, we're just not able to do that this year. So instead, we've gathered some of the best and the brightest projects that we have around our network, and we asked them to present a short webinar to you to show you what kind of work the ANFF is supporting this year across the nation. So these 6 webinars are loosely based and aligned with the national research priorities and the industry focuses of Australia with a view to economic recovery in the next couple of years. We did our foundation webinar last week with construction science, and I think that went really well, and I think it's an area where you wouldn't have expected ANFF to play a key role, but there are areas in there that fabrication is really important. This week we're talking about medtech. We have 2 wonderful speakers, and I will introduce the first one momentarily. Some housekeeping. We're going to run the Q&A as we did last week through the question and answers button. So if you wiggle your mouse, you should see a Q&A tab down the bottom. So if you want to ask a question, please send it that way. It makes them just a little bit easier to ensure that we get to everybody that's asking a question. If we don't get to you, my apologies, but we will make sure that your question is answered offline if needs be. We are recording these. So please be aware that if you do get to speak, that we are recording these. Our in-person event will be the ANFF Showcase. We have moved it to May next year in Melbourne, and we do hope that most of you can join us there to see a much larger group of ANFF-enabled researchers to talk about their science and how ANFF is supporting their world-class research. So I will now pass over to Professor Gordon Wallace, who is our ANFF Director at ANFF Materials at the University of Wollongong. He's going to talk to us today about the breadth of things that ANFF Materials have supported in the last COVID year of craziness, and how we've seen the opportunities as well as use this time to develop other pathways forward using the science and the technologies that we have, and to support medical technologies going forward. So over to you, Gordon.
Thanks, Jane. Just share the screen here, and I think it's this one. Okay, is that okay? Can you see that?
Looks good.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jane, and thanks, Tom, and everyone else who's been involved in organising this. So I'm going to focus today on a part of our activities at the ANFF Materials node here, and I will mention some of the things we've been involved in through 2020 that in some ways have assisted us to set up in an even better way for translation of fundamental research. So I'm sitting here in Wollongong with that view almost out my window, if I could move a few trees. Just right near here on the coast. It's the headquarters for an ARC Centre of Excellence for Electromaterials Science, and also the ANFF Materials node, which also includes, of course, our colleagues at the University of Newcastle, led by Professor Paul Dastour. And I will introduce to you today TRICEP, this translational facility for 3D bioprinting. Here in Wollongong, as I mentioned, it is the headquarters. Okay, it doesn't want to go. It is the headquarters for the Fundamental Research Centre of Excellence funded by the ARC. So we have about 100 people involved in fundamental research here, and then about another 20 involved in the translational activities, taking some of our fundamental discoveries, but of course enabling other fundamental discoveries from around the country to enter that translational pipeline. So that, obviously everything is based on that accumulation of talent through the national and international networks that we have established over more than a decade, and now seeing that regional network established to accrue knowledge is really a very effective network for deploying technologies both nationally and internationally as we develop them down that translational pipeline. The Innovation Campus where I'm sitting is about 200 metres to the beach. It's a purpose-built facility with customised research laboratories and translational laboratories. We first moved in here about 10 years ago and have built on the original facility ever since then. The most recent establishment of a new facility is TRICEP that you see here, which is actually just over the bridge at the back of the Innovation Campus, so close enough to walk into the fundamental research capabilities, but far enough away that it's treated as a more independent translational facility, really focused on positioning for commercial opportunity. And here on the Innovation Campus, as I mentioned, the headquarters for ACES and also for the remainder of the ANFF activities here, which go beyond bioprinting, of course, into facilitating the scale up of any new materials, newly discovered materials, and using the most advanced fabrication methods to get those new materials into devices and structures. TRICEP is focused in that area for the purpose of 3D bioprinting, but of course the ANFF materials node is bigger than that. But let me focus on TRICEP and 3D bioprinting and our efforts over the last couple of years to really establish this pipeline. So we're looking at taking fundamental research, whether it's from here at the University of Wollongong or anywhere from around the country, and assisting those fundamental discoveries to get through to commercial opportunity in this area of 3D bioprinting. Of course, that's facilitated by working closely with clinicians from around the country and also the growing number of commercial enterprises that are interested in this area as they engage around the country as well. TRICEP, as I mentioned, is a separate facility. It has separate capabilities for biofabrication, so for putting together structures containing living cells, synthesis in terms of creating bioinks and formulating bioinks, and also using our commercially available additive fabrication skills and tools to create the next generation of 3D printers for commercial opportunity. TRICEP, the staff at TRICEP has been established over the last couple of years. Some of you will recognize some of these people having been associated with the ANFF materials node previously and shifting some of their emphasis into this translational bioprinting adventure. But we have added new skills, continuing to build on mechatronic engineering, biology, chemical engineering, and of course software engineering, all of the skills that we need to build prototypes and to facilitate translation. There's two other important skills here, and people you may not have met, Dr. Tillman Bohm, who's been helping us in developing innovative modes of engagement for TRICEP, and also Michael Parlis, who's been leading up our QMS development as part of TRICEP as we move towards ISO accreditation in that facility. And it's timely that we've created TRICEP in the last couple of years, and I think in general the research and development environment has changed in this way. It used to be a very linear process back some decades ago, where we would look at generating ideas, doing research, and then looking for outputs and engaging with end users somewhere towards the end of the research. I think it's tremendous that this whole environment has changed, and ANFF has certainly contributed to the changing of that environment. I think now in 2020, let me go back there, go back. Now in 2020, we're looking at engaging all of the right skills right from the start of a project to make sure that the translational pipeline is in place. So planning for engagement right at the start of the project. And of course, you have to have the facilities and the people available to be able to do that. And that's what ANFF has been able to provide over the recent years. So we're looking at engaging not only technologists, but those concerned and with skills in ethics, regulatory, QMS I've already mentioned, and also commercial activities right from the start of a project. And I think that's an exciting new environment to be working in for our younger researchers and for those of us even not so young researchers. And let me just demonstrate how that's working for us. We've worked closely with clinicians in developing and inputting into regulatory aspects of 3D bioprinting, published in this area recently, but worked closely with the TGA in workshops, for example. And so really facilitating that translational pipeline, not just from a technological point of view, but from a regulatory point of view, and also, as I mentioned, from a commercial point of view, really putting in place the right frameworks so as we can move towards ISO accreditation by having developed an internal quality management system that enables us to do that. Now, there's one thing we've learned about over the last couple of years about implementing this quality management system, and I think we as researchers are all learning about this every day. And one thing we would all agree on is it's an incredibly resource-intensive area. This requires skills and resources not normally associated with a university activity, and yet there are skills and resources that are absolutely critical to effective translation of fundamental research. So we need to keep working together on that to make sure that happens. So back to 3D bioprinting. Well, 3D printing, as you know, is a not so unusual method anymore in terms of creating structures from the ground up, layer by layer, introducing multiple materials if necessary to create quite complex geometries that just can't be made using conventional fabrication techniques. 3D bioprinting takes that to a new level, introducing other biological entities into the structure as we print. They could be drugs or proteins or a range of biomolecules, and of course living cells integrated into those systems. Now, most of the systems available for doing 3D bioprinting on the bench are very sophisticated, very powerful, I must say, sophisticated and expensive pieces of machinery. So in the course of what we've been doing and working towards customized 3D bioprinters for clinical applications, we've also been involved in developing a robust and a simple 3D bioprinter that can be used for research and training purposes. And I'll come back to this in a moment. We're very proud of all of the knowledge that's gone into the design and building of this 3D ready system. As I say, a simple 3D bioprinting system that can really make 3D bioprinting accessible to a wide range of researchers. But why would anybody want to get into 3D bioprinting? I was fortunate to sit in on a webinar just a couple of weeks ago, run by Carmine Gentle at the UTS, and Alfredo gave a presentation on the commercial elements of 3D bioprinting. And let me just focus on this. So 2019, we're looking at a market value of 650 million, growing at 20% per year over the next 5 years, up to 1.6 billion. So it's an area that is prime for involvement. And as Alberto pointed out, Australia is particularly well placed to take advantage of this growing market. Our geographical location means that we can service the most rapidly growing areas like India and China, but also our medtech environment and our ability to create multidisciplinary teams very effectively means that we have an edge in this area. And you have to be able to create multidisciplinary teams in this area in order to progress anything. It's those weaving of skills that I mentioned before, weaving those together is critical to success in this area. But given all of that opportunity, you know, how do we pick what opportunities we should focus on for translation? Well, we're very much driven by the clinicians that we work with. And again, this is a uniquely Australian advantage, I think, to be able to tap into these clinical networks in order to drive these opportunities in 3D bioprinting. I can't talk about all of the projects we're working on today, so let me just pick out a couple and highlight to you some of the advantages, or some of the opportunities that are emerging. So the first was in cartilage regeneration, and historically this was our first foray into 3D bioprinting, printing stem cells directly into a defect in the knee, with the right carriers, the right biomaterials, and the right cells, in order to regenerate cartilage in the knee. And our clinicians we work with are Peter Chung and Claudia DeBella, and we've successfully developed bioinks and the hardware needed to deliver that 3D printed structure into the knee. And that's been quite a journey over the last number of years. And we're just at the moment in the midst of large animal trials to prove the efficacy of this approach. Of course, it started with using those sophisticated bioprinters that we use on the bench, the optimized materials and cell delivery into those structures, and to show on the bench, first of all, that we could regenerate cartilage, and then to take that into a more clinical environment required the development of a handheld printer, originally the BioPen, now known as the Excelda BioPen. And that there's a few features about this handheld printer. It has a coaxial tip on it, which allows us to protect the cells during printing in the core of the structure, while the shell provides mechanical robustness and other biochemical properties that facilitate the cartilage regeneration. So as you can imagine, that's been a real iterative process between optimizing the ink, optimizing the pen, and optimizing it all in a way that can be delivered into a clinical environment. But we have managed to get there. We have prototypes now that have been used in those large animal studies, and we're just waiting for the final data analysis on those before moving forward further down that translational pipeline. And what we've learned, of course, is that for these clinical applications, really what the clinician wants in terms of a printer is a very simple approach. So these printers are built to do one job. So the Excelda BioPen is built to print into defects in the knee for cartilage regeneration. It doesn't need all the flexibility and versatility of a high-powered research printer that you would have on the bench. But we've learned a lot in developing these customized systems that have really gone into, as I mentioned previously, the design and development of the 3D Ready system, this bioprinter, which we've already supplied to a number of our collaborators for evaluation. And we propose to launch this particular system later this year and have it commercially available early next year. So if you're available, Thursday the 26th of November will be the official launch of the 3D Ready bioprinter for research and educational purposes. And it really is an avenue to facilitate the engagement of a much wider range of the community with 3D bioprinting. If I go back to the cartilage project, though, it sparked another couple of projects. One was with the clinician Jared Sutton, who's seen the pen idea and was interested, first of all, in corneal regeneration. And that's a fundamental project that we are still undertaking with Jared and his team. And as you can imagine, regeneration of the complete cornea is a challenging aspect, but we're pushing down that line. And as we find with many of these clinical projects, the clinicians identify a much shorter term commercial opportunities. And so the iFix system utilizes one component of the bioinks that we might use for corneal regeneration, but for a much simpler and yet important short-term application. And that's simply for printing directly into the eye to repair wounds or ulcers in the eye because of the effectiveness of the bioink in being able to do that. And that in itself presents a commercial opportunity, and one that we're pursuing at the moment with iFix Medical, using the capabilities of Tricep to facilitate the development of the printing system, and also assisting with development of the bioink system up to commercial standards. And still back on the cartilage project, Dr. Payal Mukherjee is an ENT surgeon who, seen with our ability to create cartilage, perhaps we could regrow ears for people that had bits of ears or complete ears missing, suffering from microtia. And so with Payal, we built another customized printer, which enabled us to create hybrid structures that would enable the cartilage to grow, but grow in a way that it was supported by other mechanical structures you can see here, in order to give that mechanical robustness and to give that shape fidelity to the ear. This project is ongoing, creating the living ear through 3D bioprinting. But as with all our projects, and in working with Payal, we visited India this time with other collaborators, and we found again that there was a shorter term application of 3D printing here. And it's not necessarily for the 3D printed living ear, but just for 3D printed prosthetics. And so we've been working with prostheticists here in Australia and India. Sophie Fleming here in Australia, and other groups at QUT and Deakin, for example, to build a very effective system for doing 3D printed prosthetic ears. And that involves all of the scanning of the ear using mobile phone technologies, through to the slice and dice software, the development of a customized printer, and then working with the prosthetist to finish that ear off for application to the patient. So we're using simple mobile phone scanning technologies, export that data into the printer, and we've developed a customized printer that prints PDMS, the material of choice for these types of prosthetics, enables us to complete this whole system. There's still a lot of refinement to be done at each of these steps, but working with the prostheticists, we can see, again, opportunities to introduce bits of this technology into the prosthetic environment as we're developing and refining it to the end game. Our current printer is generation 2 of the silicon 3D printer. We call it Genie, and this is about to be sent to our collaborators in India for evaluation with their prosthetics people, but also with AMTZ, a Medtech zone in India that we're working very closely with. And just a final example, I'll go back to our clinical environment. It's with Fiona Wood. With Fiona, we have been engaged in, again, a very ambitious project, which is to create a 3D printing system for full wound repair. You can imagine that doing complete wound repair involves many different layers of materials and cells, thinking about sweat glands, thinking about hair follicles. And so that's a big, bold, ambitious project. But again, along the line, and thanks to our collaboration with Fiona and also with Inventia, we've just embarked on a new project which will take simpler technologies, but build on those simpler technologies to introduce the advantages of 3D printing in terms of arrangement of materials and the structuring of those materials, and perhaps directly into the wound in order to get shorter term benefits. So as you can see with all of the examples I've put to you, while there is a long-term, lofty technological goal, there are short-term commercial opportunities. And if we have the right commercial pipelines in place, translational pipelines in place, then we're well placed to take advantage of those. So I just thank Inventia in particular and all of our colleagues who've really helped to pull this project together in recent times. I'm just going to finish with a couple of points on the actual source of the materials. Very critical to any commercialization activity. All of the bioinks, or many of them, are based on naturally occurring materials. So we work with seaweed farmers like Pia Winberg here to identify good sources of materials that we can then functionalize or purify to integrate them into bioink formulations. Pia's just set up a new facility down on the south coast here in just south of Wollongong, and we're working very closely with Pia in identifying where the opportunities are for biomaterials from the sea into bioinks. And it's not just polysaccharides like ulvan that we work on, but also things like alginate from seaweed and even collagen from fish or other marine sources that we're looking at with Pia at the moment. So very important part of the pipeline, identifying those sources. And then at Tricep, we also have the facilities for optimizing the formulations, optimizing sterilization routines, and packaging and transport routines as well. I'll just skip through that. It's a paper on comparing sterilization techniques, just to say that that's an area that we're quite passionate about and making sure we get that right, because it's so critical to the whole translational aspects. And the packaging and transportation. Not something we thought we would get into, but it's obviously a critical point of product delivery, is how we transport the product and how we monitor that transportation to the customer, to the end user, in order to make sure they get the right quality product at the end. Sanjeev and I will be running an ACES and ANFF webinar on bioinks on the 9th of November, and all of you are most welcome to join us at that. So I'll just finish with a couple of slides. I think what we've been trying to do is establish the facilities and the people with the right skills to enable the identification of commercial opportunities through very close engagement with end users, and those end users being the clinicians that I've mentioned throughout this presentation, and many others which I didn't have the opportunity to mention. The other critical part to translation, of course, is creating the workforce that's capable of doing that translation. In many of the activities we've been involved in before, we've realized just how critical having those people available to move with the technology is, and having them trained in a proper translational facility like TRICEP just adds to that, the skills that they can take with them in terms of translating technologies. So it's been an interesting journey so far for us at the ANFF Materials node, not just in biomaterials and bioprinting, even though that's what I've focused on today. I hope you can see that we've worked to put in place that translational pipeline. It's been a journey enabled by ANFF in terms of the facilities and the people and skills that we've been able to accrue to undertake the many challenges at hand. So thank you all for the opportunity to talk to you, and hopefully this is just the start of a conversation today. And if there's any other questions after today, I'm of course happy to take those on board as well. So back to you, Jane, I guess. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Gordon. That was a rapid flow through of some of the incredible work that you guys have been doing down there in pushing bioprinting forward in Australia. We have time for one or two quick questions. Nothing's popped up as yet, but I will start with this one. If there are, you do mention that you're talking about bringing in collaborators to put them onto this translational pipeline. How do people get involved with that? Is it through a research collaboration, or do they knock on your door and say, please help?
Yeah, it could vary, Jen. As you know, there are some that we would undertake the development of a bioink formulation, for example, and carry that right through to scale up synthesis. But then there are other examples where people come to us and they have their formulation. It might just need to be better characterized and optimized, and the scale up of the synthesis optimized as well. And similarly on the printing side, people could come looking for a printer to do a particular task, whereas others may come with a new printing technology and want prototyping capabilities to demonstrate their technology. So it's the whole spectrum. I think if people need to either address issues in the bioink synthesis and scale up, or on the printer prototyping or demonstrations, then we're here to help.
Great to hear. I will close it there. If there are any questions, drop them in the Q&A and I'll make sure Gordon gets to them and replies to them at his leisure, because we all know that he has plenty of leisure time.
Sure.
And say thank you very much, Gordon, for that talk for us. Our second speaker today is Dr. Anthony Brewer, who has been a long time user of ANFF facilities and a long time continuous improvement advocate for what ANFF is able to provide to our industry partners. So Anthony is the head of R&D at WearOptimo, a new-ish startup developing wearable technologies for personalized medicine applications. And he's going to give us a fly through of what their technology looks like and how they're going to save the world one patient at a time. So over to you, please, or Anthony.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jane, and thank you for the introduction. I'll just briefly share my screen. Okay, fantastic. Well, again, thank you, Jane and Tom, for the introductions, the opportunity to be here today, and thank you, Jane, for the introduction. And so, like Jane said, my name is Anthony Brewer, and I head the research and development here at WearOptimo. WearOptimo is newish, as Jane said. We were founded in 2018, and I joined in 2018. And just briefly about me, so I am a physicist by training, so I did my PhD in molecular beam epitaxy and the growth of gallium arsenide, aluminium gallium arsenide superlattices for quantum cascade lasers. and their clean room fabrication and electro-optic characterization. And while I loved the research, I loved being in the lab, I was always a little bit disappointed for the timeframes for commercialization, taking technologies to market. So after my PhD, I was quite clear in that I didn't want to become an academic, and instead I wanted to work in industry. And over the last 8 or 9 years, I have held a few postdocs and predominantly worked in industry and also in new startups and new enterprises. So I'd like to start today with the mission values. Apologies. So WearOptimo, why are we here? Why do we get out of bed in the morning? So ultimately, the vision or the mission of WearOptimo is empowerment. It is empowering you, it is empowering people, and it's empowerment in healthcare, particularly around health data. So we're sitting here today and I'm talking to you. Obviously, we're communicating at a distance, and many of us will have our smartphones right next to us. Many of you may be on social media as we speak, and we're really well connected. And I can use my smartphone right now, for example, to look at my bank balance, and it will alert me if money goes in and money goes out. My home is relatively modern and it's well connected, and I can look at my energy usage. So I can see how my electricity is tracking today, now, but also in the past. Am I using more electricity today than I was last week, last year? So all those kind of continuous monitoring and really cool electronics. Same, I can turn lights on and off. And I also have cameras automated. They're actually enabled through artificial intelligence, and they continuously monitor. If they see motion, if they detect the person, they will alert me to my smartphone. That's all amazing stuff. But as I sit to you today and I talk to you today and you sit there, if I have a health condition, an illness that's unknown to me, I have no senses. There's no way for me to be alerted about that. If I have an illness, the first time I'm aware of that is when it presents, when I get pain, when I actually become ill, and we're being reactive. Then I'll present to a clinician, they'll do some tests and they'll tell me what was wrong. But could I have known sooner? If we were actually sensing people and their health, could we actually stop illnesses from happening? Could we save lives? So really why we're here is empowerment, empowering you, empowering your families, empowering communities with health data. So I want to actually start today with COVID-19. It's giant, it's life-changing. It's probably one of the biggest events to happen in our lifetime, in our generation. And so it will be crazy to be talking about health tech and medtech, but not mentioning COVID-19, how that might impact us in the future. And then I'll talk about WearOptimo, how we're affiliated with the ANU, what's the problem we solve, and the solution. I'm going to keep it quite high level today. So look, apologies, a lot of words here. I will leave this for a minute or two to digest it. But COVID-19, it's clearly huge. And every time we turn on the news, it's massive, it's negative, it's having a fundamental change, a fundamental impact all around the world. And it really is a truly global problem facing humanity. And it's having a huge toll on patients, governments, healthcare, health systems. And we were somewhat caught by surprise. Should we have been? Probably not. It wasn't unexpected that a global pandemic could happen. It's happened in the past. We've come close in the past too with MERS and SARS and Ebola. And so no, we shouldn't have been surprised, but we clearly were. I guess we were somewhat complacent. And poor Bill Gates is the conspiracy theorist choice of bad guy. But he did really give a really good talk in 2015 on how we're not ready for the next global catastrophe around the pandemic. And if you've not seen that TED Talk, I'd encourage you to go and give it a look. Now, I hope that when we get the pandemic to manageable levels, and I don't say conclude, I don't mean cure, I mean to manageable levels, because there might be a really long time horizon to seeing this positive conclusion. Can we use the current lessons and what we've achieved in the last few short months to have a significant change in how we do healthcare in the future? Okay, so we've seen a big change in how healthcare is provided today than where we were just 12 months ago. And that's predominantly around telehealth. So if you wanted to see your clinician, maybe today, maybe in the last few months, it's actually really difficult, if not impossible, to get a face-to-face. And Zoom, telehealth, Now that's really just scratching the surface about what could be achieved using technology today. So virtual care is not just simply taking care out of hospitals or GP offices and doing it over Zoom. Virtual care is actually doing things in the community. So it's really acknowledging that our health is largely shaped by events before or after we see clinicians and doctors and health professionals. So remote digital health technology can help us to foster a much more holistic and ultimately a much more effective health system. But really that comes down to having better or improved technology. So COVID-19, we really scratched the surface about what could be achieved with new technology. And telehealth is one small step in towards that aim. Now, WearOptimo, because of how we're founded, and I'll get into that a little bit, and because we like to see ourselves as a national asset for the benefit of Australians and global citizens, we quite quickly, when COVID-19 was becoming more of an issue around our February, March time, we actually somewhat paused our commercial trajectory and what we were working on at the time, and we did focus on COVID-19 and can we use our sensors, our micro-wearable sensors, and I'll talk about what they are shortly. Can we use them for good here in Australia for COVID-19? So I have a short video, it will last just 2 minutes or so. This was from a local news channel here in Brisbane and in Queensland. And it gives a little bit of an introduction to our technology, who we are and where we're based. So it should only last 2 minutes.
A team of Queensland scientists is now developing a stick-on coronavirus warning device. The state-of-the-art invention allowing doctors to predict which patients will need intensive care as they walk in the door.
The new weapon in the war on COVID-19, a tiny sticker made in Queensland by some of the world's brightest minds.
What we have here is a device that gives you a signal in real time and sends that signal to something like an iPhone.
Simply stuck to the forearm. It doesn't tell doctors whether a patient has coronavirus. Instead, it detects how their immune system is responding. When you contract coronavirus, your body begins to produce things called cytokines to fight the illness. In some people, the body overreacts, producing a cytokine storm. And research shows patients with elevated levels of one particular cytokine, IL-6, are those most likely to need intensive care and ventilation.
At the moment, people are dying across the world because they can't have access to those therapies and that piece of equipment. And so what we're providing is a way to look into the future and to see, is this patient likely to need those things? And if so, there can be some forward planning.
Scientists here at WearOptimo and Wollongabba have been partnering with the Australian National University to make micro-wearables. This, one of their most time-critical projects. Just 3 weeks ago, the team was working on a sticker to detect the early signs of a heart attack, but with COVID-19 spreading across the globe, that's now been put on hold.
We're suspending the way that we normally work. Everything is a lot quicker because we're on a wartime footing.
Even manufacturing will need to happen in Brisbane.
COVID-19's introduced all manner of constraints in ways that we've never dealt with before, but part of that is how the borders are closed.
Clinical trials are being fast-tracked and all going well. The device will be available on a large scale before the end of the year. Reece D'Alessandro, 9 News.
Okay, fantastic. So on that, I'd actually just like to acknowledge ANFF's role in helping us with that work, particularly during the time of lockdown when a lot of people were not able to do their work or get into the clean rooms or do their research. ANFF really helped us to move forward with that technology and that testing. Now, because how COVID-19 was resolved in Australia, we're still pushing forward with sensors for patients with COVID, but we're also pushing forward on our more traditional commercial trajectory of sensors for heart attack patients, sensors for people infected with, for example, sepsis and hydration. So we're moving forward on multiple fronts. Okay, so
A team of
I'm
Queensland...
going to play that again. There we go. Next slide. Okay. So really, telehealth allows remote diagnostics or remote interactions really to diagnose a condition, to actually really treat a patient remotely, will require cost-effective and miniaturized sensors. And that's really where WearOptimo was founded. And so now let's get a little bit into WearOptimo. So WearOptimo is a strategic initiative of the Australian National University. a really interesting model. So Australia does great research. I mean, we do great fundamental research, we publish, and we punch above our weights, and it's fantastic. But maybe we lag behind in commercialization compared to our peers in Europe or the US, for example. And so the ANU is the Australian National University, and this is an initiative of the VC here on the left with Mark. So Professor Brian Smith, and he has a great initiative where, okay, what if we get some entrepreneurial professors, and they do great work, but what if we fund them, and what if we give them the resources to the university to found companies to have a real positive impact in Australia and potentially globally as well. And so WearOptimo is a partner innovation company of the ANU, and we have their institutional backing and the support at the very high levels, and that's fantastic. We're not based in Canberra. We're based in Brisbane. There's reasons for that. So the infrastructure is just a little bit more established here in Brisbane, particularly on hardware, electronics, and Medtech. So we've got some great local partners that we work with. Okay, and look, I'd like to acknowledge the team as well. So over the last 18 months or so, we've grown quite a lot. So I joined WearOptimo in 2018, and at the time it was myself and Mark in a small office, and now we've grown to a headcount of around 17 to 18 FTEs, and that's also supported well. So I think it's a high-performing team made up predominantly of PhD scientists from all over the world, and also a multidisciplinary team, a little bit like Gordon in his previous presentation talked about. So we really require multidisciplinary input from chemists, scientists, physicists, engineers, material scientists to push forward on the technology. But of course, we are working towards this as a commercial endeavor. So we also have a commercial team and commercial analysts who are taking forward the R&D, taking forward the product towards commercial outputs. Okay, so I showed you our mission, which was about empowering people with health data to solve significant and real-world problems. So the problem we're solving is we're all sitting here today, and our body is just jammed-packed full of data, health data, but we can't actually get into that data. We can't harvest it. We can't act on it. So your body is giving real-world vital health signals, but until now, there's no real way of being able to access that data. Now, smartwatches, Apple Watches, Fitbits, they're cute. They're effectively toys at the moment. They sit outside of the body. They give us a little bit of insight into what's going on. But if you've got an issue, you go to your clinician, they don't put a smartwatch on you, they'll take blood, they'll take observations, they will examine you. Most of the really critical information is inside the body. WearOptimo's solution is what we call a micro-wearable. It's a wearable device, it sits outside of the body, but it has these microstructures that go shallowly into the skin, accessing biomarkers, giving us access to that wealth of data inside the body. We do that continuously over hours, over days, in a very easy, low-cost sticker-like device that's functionalized, potentially detection chemistry, that's integrated electronics, has these microstructures to get into the skin, and they can communicate with smartphones and other smart devices, and that data could be provided to the patient. It could also be provided to the clinician. So this really could be impactful, could really supercharge medicine in the next century, well, I guess as we move forward, so in this century as well, but really supercharge our understanding of health and how we treat and monitor health and disease. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about the technology today in the interest of time. I want to give you a brief overview of everything that we do. But ultimately, the technology is that microstructured array. So we get through the skin, we break through those outer tough layers of the skin. That gives us access to those wealth of biosignals and biomarkers in the body. And we can monitor them continuously and non-invasively in a low-cost, simple device. So right now, some of the things we're working towards and commercial embodiments of our sensors is that we can detect the very early proteins of a heart attack. So when you have a heart attack, or even before the symptoms present, As the myocardial tissue is damaged and dies, certain proteins that are sensitive and specific to myocardial infarctions are released into the body, and they're just freely circulating. And we can access that in the interstitial fluid in the skin, and we can measure the concentration and the presence of those proteins. And it's a diagnostic tool of a heart attack. But more than just saying, yep, you've had a heart attack, if we monitor continuously the kinetics of those proteins as they go up, as they go down, do they go up again, we can get further health insights into what's possible today with episodic blood draws. So rather than getting one data point every 4 hours, every 8 hours, maybe every day, and of course, if you're in the bush, if you're in remote settings, you actually don't have a great deal of pathology laboratory input. So maybe even once a day blood draws is a bit of a luxury. So imagine doing that continuously on the body, and how those kind of health insights would allow clinicians to tailor therapies and treatment specifically for you and your condition at that time. Okay, so microwearables are designed to give a fundamental change in healthcare, allowing us to access biomarkers, health data continuously on the body in real time. So we like to think that we're a new category of sensor. We're not like blood draws, we're not like surface-based, we're quite new. And that's really shown here in the next slide. So look, traditionally, if you present to your clinician with an illness, with a chest pain, they will take blood. And that's likely to continue for the foreseeable future. Taking blood is a relatively old technology, although the assays around how we do this, the analysis of those blood draws has advanced massively. Still sticking needles into people, extracting body fluids, sending it away to a laboratory for analysis. It takes time to get that data, and it also gives us one single data point. Now, many of you who are sitting there with smartwatches like an Apple Watch, like a Fitbit, it gives us some really cool information around how we exercise, how we might sleep, but it's really just scratching the surface about what we do. So they're gadgets, they're toys, and we'd certainly like to think that those surface-based wearables will advance massively as we move forward. But to get access to the key information, you actually need to get into the body. Now, there's some really good work around implantables, and they will be really useful for chronic conditions like diabetes and other chronic conditions. But when you're presenting to your GP with chest pain, for example, they're not going to want to put an implant in you. Instead, put a sticker on the outside that gets into the body, accessing the key information. Okay, look, this is my second to last slide. This is information that's on our website, and I'd encourage you to go to the website of WearOptimo.com if you'd like further information. It does give you an idea into the kind of domains or the areas we're pushing forward in. Cardiovascular disease is the single biggest killer on the planet today. 1 in 4 people who die will die from cardiovascular disease, and almost 20 million people this year will die of a heart attack. So cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, myocardial infarction are giant and life-changing to many, many people. So that's really our biggest push at the moment, as a wearable for cardiovascular disease, heart attack patients. But beyond that, we're also pushing forward with hydration. Now, hydration, you might think it's strange, who cares? Hydration is actually really important. So many elderly people, for example, in a geriatric aged care facility will be chronically dehydrated. There's many reasons for that. As you get older, your thirst response actually decreases. So it's actually quite difficult to maintain adequate hydration in many people, and in many of the elderly people, but also in the pediatrics as well. So, but what about in workplaces? So there's many people working in extreme environments of mining sites, the resource sector, the police, the military, firefighters. So if you become just a little bit dehydrated, 1 to 2% of your body mass sounds like a lot, but it's actually not really. It actually has a mental impairment. So staying hydrated, adequately hydrated, is good for performance, keeps people sharp in extreme environments like a mining site. And right now, you only know when you become dehydrated because you show symptoms like a headache or if you are in a mining site, it's actually urine charts on the side, on the walls of the toilets, and you're encouraged to look at your urine and the color of that. It's telling you you're already dehydrated. You've actually reached a point that you shouldn't be at. So imagine a wearable that you can put on the skin. You wear it like a sticker. You can interrogate it with your smartphone, and it will continuously monitor your hydration, or it will continuously monitor proteins in your body that are indicative of disease or illness progression. So look, that was a very brief overview of WearOptimo. I hope you took something from that. We like to think that we're helping to grow the ecosystem. So if you have any questions and you don't want to raise it today, please reach out offline. We'll help in any way we can. And that's just because we've been in the field ourselves for quite some time, but also as a partner innovation company of the ANU, we like to think that we want to be involved in growing that ecosystem and helping Australia compete globally. I'd like to just finish on acknowledgements. I wouldn't be here today, and WearOptimo wouldn't be in Australia without the equipment and the infrastructure of the ANFF. So we're here because you're here. But more than the equipment is the professional officers. So every day we're leveraging the knowledge base that you guys have, all that knowledge and experience in your head. Thank you for that. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for helping us. Queensland node right there at the top, because they are a local node. We're pretty much there every day in the clean room. So thank you all for your efforts. And the other nodes we've touched base with over the last 12 months or so, particularly the MCN, the ACT nodes, and the New South Wales nodes. And maybe the other nodes we haven't really worked with so far, but who knows moving forward. So thank you again, and please, if you have any questions, we'd like to answer them.
Thank you very much, Anthony. That was again a really nice overview of where you sit and what your mission is and how you plan to actually achieve your very lofty goals with the technologies you have in your hands. We have had a couple of questions in. I will throw the first one at you because we have time probably for two. The first one is the way you're considering testing people by putting on a continual patch. It will change the way people think about their illness and the impact of that illness if they have a visible reminder of it constantly there. Are you looking to see what the impacts of those changes on patient and on patient experience is actually going to be?
Yeah, it's really interesting around the psychology. And so as well as the technology, and I focus really around the R&D, that's my role here, but user engagement, we're making a technology that will be used by people in the real world. So we actually talk to a lot of users, and the users are a patient, but it's also a clinician or a clinical staff member. So yeah, we certainly like to think that if you have more health data and you're more conscious and more aware of your health, that not only is it helping you to monitor disease or an illness, but it's just making people more aware of their health and of health insights, and maybe making them more healthy in areas beyond what we're measuring. So yeah, we certainly like to believe that. It's really interesting, the whole kind of psychology of wearable diagnostics and how that might tune people into their health more and maybe impact on things beyond what we're measuring, like obesity, just general wellness.
And then another thing that somebody has mentioned, I think I could probably answer this one from my conversations previously with you, but when you're looking at personalized medicine and you're looking at something like myocardial infarction, we know that there are sex differences. How do you deal with the sex differences in the biomarker levels?
So we really deal with those differences through a great deal of trials, clinical trials, in the animal model initially, and then in the human model. So we back up our sensor through a great deal of data. And so we will go through the traditional phase 1 clinical trials, phase 2, before pushing this out. So we will be leveraging hundreds or thousands of sensors on real world people so that we can get those population data to do with age, to do with sex. And right now with myocardial infarction, clinicians are relatively limited in how they can treat you. So if you are giving a therapy, for example, the therapy they gave me might be the same as they gave you, Jane, might be the same as they give someone else. Because they lack any real insights into what's going on, And the insight they have is relatively old. The last troponin level, which is the protein we measure, might be from 4 hours ago, 6 hours ago. So personalized medicine is about tailoring the therapy, and that therapy tailorization is driven by the clinician. We're not replacing a clinician, we're empowering that clinician to be able to give you therapy in a way that's best for you and the individual.
Great. Thank you very much, Anthony. So I'll let you away there from any more questions. So thank you again. And I really do appreciate that last slide, as everybody in the ANFF I'm sure does. It's nice to know that we are actually giving you the tools that you need to actually do the work that you're doing in a commercial setting. That's really useful for us and gratifying to know that that happens. So thank you very much once again, Anthony. So with that, everyone, that's the end of today's seminar. I would like to thank you all for joining us today. Anthony and Gordon, I think, have given us really nice overviews of what kind of projects we're supporting across the breadth of the medtech industry here in Australia. Next week it's Space and Defence, and we're talking about augmented reality and how we're putting microfluidics and nanofab into space applications. So we're really pushing the boundaries of what we can do here in Australia in association with some of our partners in NASA and in the Australian Space Agency, and some of the CRCs, the larger CRCs out there, including SmartSat. So I'd like to make sure that you come and join us next week for some more wonderful talks on ANFF science. And I look forward to seeing you all there. So thank you very much for your input today.